There's been an ongoing discussion about free speech on college campuses for just over a year now. Probably a lot longer, but it's been in the cultural eye for just over a year following Milo Yiannopoulos' event at Berkeley that got shut down by Antifa. One of the most recent incidents is when Sargon of Akkad, real name Carl Benjamin, attempted to speak at a college in London, and activists came and shut the event down. There is a trend. We are seeing something actually happen at universities where protesters don't allow certain ideas to be expressed. But it's not just free speech. Many colleges, some schools, even high schools, are starting to behave like authoritarian regimes, spying on students, tracking everything they do, and even monitoring their activities at home. It's not just about free speech, but certainly free expression is being threatened. Following what happened with Sargon of Akkad, a lecture on free speech was also canceled. But before I get into all of that, let me give a quick shout out to today's sponsor, all of you guys. If you haven't already, go to patreon.com/Timcast and become a patron today. There are many different tiers to choose from. Most notably is tier 1 at $10 per month. You get access to behind the scenes photos and videos and bonus commentary videos from when I am out in the field reporting. When you give on Patreon, you help support the work that I do, so please consider becoming a Patreon at any level you feel comfortable today. The story from the Daily Mail. Lecturer is banned from giving talk on free speech at his own university after being blasted by hard left activists. A lecturer has been prevented from giving a talk about free speech at his own university after he was criticized by hard left activists. Dr. Adam Perkins, who teaches psychology at King's College London, was told his event was being postponed because it had been assessed as high risk. The talk, which was scheduled to take place on campus yesterday, was called The Scientific Importance of Free Speech. But officials became worried it could be gatecrashed by demonstrators who are opposed to Dr. Perkins' research. This is called a heckler's veto, when someone threatens violence or disruption resulting in an event being shut down. In this instance, ironically, the event was supposed to be talking about the scientific importance of free speech, but due to a fear of demonstrators disrupting the event, the free speech event was silenced. The heckler's veto, according to Wikipedia, in the free speech context, a heckler's veto is either of two situations in which a person who disagrees with a speaker's message is able to unilaterally trigger events that result in the speaker being silenced. In the strict legal sense, a heckler's veto occurs when the speaker's right is curtailed or restricted by the government in order to prevent a reacting party's behavior. Due to a fear of demonstrations, a reaction from activists, this event was canceled. So it does fit the general idea of what a heckler's veto is, though many people would debate whether or not the government shut the event down. But this is a college, so that'll be up to you guys to figure out. The academic, who has worked at King's for 8 years specializing in the neurobiology of personality, has been targeted online by hard left activists in recent years. They branded him racist because of research he did about US President Donald Trump's controversial travel ban on people from some Muslim-majority countries, and also claimed a book he wrote about the welfare state is offensive to the poor. It comes almost 2 weeks after masked protesters punched a security guard to gain access to another Libertarian Society event featuring a right-wing academic and a blogger accused of being anti-feminist. By no means was this a controversial event, as the value of free speech to scientific discovery cannot be questioned. It is a bit ironic to see that a free speech lecture was shut down, because the point of the lecture was to talk about why it's important we're allowed to talk about certain ideas. How do we fight for scientific progress if controversial ideas are not allowed? How do we fight for equal rights if one particular group or a certain group isn't allowed to express their frustration? What if at some point one group accuses another group of oppressing them and they say, hey, you can't target that group, that's hateful? We need to be able to express ourselves so that people can hear good ideas and hear the bad ideas to know which ideas they want to avoid. But in an additional twist of irony, a video is being circulated of personality Tommy Robinson, who has been extremely critical of Islam and immigration in the UK. He was attempting to speak at what's known as Speaker's Corner when he was removed by the police.
So basically, what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to talk about freedom of speech being under attack. And as I'm trying to talk about freedom of speech, these guys have turned up. They've told me I'm not allowed to talk about freedom of speech. I'm not allowed to. I have to leave this park. I'm in Speaker's Corner in Hyde Park. I was here to talk about the value and the history behind Speaker's Corner. 300 years of history. 300 years of history, people have come here with difference of opinions and difference of thoughts. From George Orwell to Lenin, to Karl Marx. People have been free to come to this park, to criticise different ideas, to debate. Are you finished now, officers?
I can take details then.
So I have to give you my details.
Well, yeah,
by law.
So I need to...
In this video, you see police, you see Tommy Robinson, who is a controversial figure, and the police ask him for his details, and Tommy is angry, saying that he was simply trying to speak. This is a historical place for free speech in the United Kingdom. But let's look at what Speaker's Corner is, according to Wikipedia. Speaker's Corner is an area where open-air public speaking, debate, and discussion are allowed. The original and most noted in the northeast corner of Hyde Park in London, UK. Speakers here may talk on any subject as long as the police consider their speeches lawful, although this right is not restricted to Speaker's Corner only. Contrary to popular belief, there is no immunity from the law, nor are any subjects proscribed. But in practice, the police tend to be tolerant and therefore intervene only when they receive a complaint. On some occasions in the past, they have intervened on grounds of profanity. Historically, there were a number of areas designated as Speaker's Corners in other parks in London. More recently, they have been set up in other British cities, and there are also Speaker's Corners in other countries. Certainly, the UK is not known for free speech the way the United States is, but this is another part of the irony in the free speech debate. Tommy Robinson was attempting to talk about the importance of free speech, and the police turned up and said, you can't do it. And according to Wikipedia, if the police say it's not lawful, then you can't do it. Like I said, the UK doesn't have free speech the same way the US does. But it is absolutely ironic that in these instances in the UK, people who have attempted to speak freely about the right to speak freely have been shut down. And it is extremely alarming, because the moment you can't share an idea, that is the moment we stop progressing as a civilization. But let's say you don't want to speak. Let's say it's not about free speech, it's about the right to just say, you know what, leave me out of it. Certainly, I have made every attempt to keep my actual politics out of my work, at least in the past couple of years. Because when you look at my older work, you'll see it is very in support of progressive ideals and social justice, things I very much still believe in and would love to have a debate about. But the reason I don't overtly talk about political activism is because I want to be able to have open discussion with people and make sure, regardless of what we think the right thing to do is, we have the most accurate data available to us. And that means sometimes there are ideas we don't want to hear. Sometimes there are ideas that make us feel like they're wrong and they shouldn't be spoken, but they can be right. Like, go back in time to the idea of a geocentric universe. It was wrong, and nobody wanted to hear about a heliocentric solar system, but the idea needed to come out no matter how offensive or crazy it sounded. Now we're hearing there was a student who did not want to participate in the gun protest walkout. You may have heard that in the past couple days, many students walked out of their schools in protest of gun violence. And a student at one particular school in Ohio said, you know what, leave me out of it. The result, he got a suspension. He was punished for essentially trying to remain neutral. It's a little bit more complicated than that. So let's look at what actually happened. According to the Associated Press, student suspended for staying in class during walkouts. In Hilliard, Ohio, a high school student says he tried to remain non-political during school walkouts over gun violence and was suspended for a day because he stayed in a classroom instead of joining protests or the alternative, a study hall. Hilliard senior Jacob Shoemaker says school isn't the place for politics and he wasn't taking sides Wednesday. The district says it's responsible for student safety and they can't be unsupervised. So it would seem that what happened was, when all these students decided to walk out, one student said, I'm going to stay out of this and just stay in my classroom doing my work. The school said, well, if you don't want to protest, go to the study hall. And for whatever reason, the student said he didn't want to be involved and was going to stay in class, so they issued a suspension. Simply the act of not participating in a protest or an alternative during a protest, the idea that he would just do nothing and say, I'm going to keep doing my thing, was considered a punishable offense. So now what are we seeing? A few things. I don't think this instance of the student being suspended is evidence of the collapse of society. But we need to pay attention to stories like this. We need to be vigilant, because when you have numerous instances of speakers being denied their right to speak, when certain organizations invite speakers and are shut down, when a student says, you know what, it's not about speech, it's about not participating, and also gets punished, it's looking pretty scary, because we're on a path that leads to a terrifying future where it's not just about your right to speak, because we're seeing these events shut down. You may end up in a world where you're not allowed to speak, but not just that. You might end up in a world where if you don't speak the opinion they want, you will get punished as well. Staying quiet, it would seem, may also result in punishment. These are not absolute. These are a few instances. And just because we're hearing stories like this doesn't mean the world is ending, and it certainly doesn't mean this is a symptom of the greater society. Currently, Emily is working on a piece for Subverse about perceptions of free speech at colleges, and that should be a little interesting. But for me, I like to focus on these stories to make sure we're as vigilant as possible. Because the moment we let up, the moment we stop and say, I don't think this one issue is a big deal, that's the moment when we lose ground. And if we lose the right to express ourselves, we will stop progressing. There will never be social justice. There will never be equality, and there will not be scientific progress if people aren't allowed to speak controversial opinions. At some point in the past 50 or so years, certain ideas about social justice were considered offensive, and it is the people's right to protest and say what they want to say, regardless of what the government or the hecklers want to say. You have a right to express yourself, and hopefully we retain that right. Hopefully we stay vigilant and call out the BS when we see it, so that we don't wake up one day wondering how it got this bad. But let me know what you think in the comments below, and we will keep the conversation going. What do you think about all this? How do you feel about what happened with Tommy Robinson? How do you feel about this lecture at King's College in London, which is all just so horrifyingly ironic? Comment below, and we will keep talking. You can follow me on Twitter at Timcast. Stay tuned. New videos every day at 4 p.m. It's getting warmer out, so hopefully there will be a bit more traveling and a bit more on-the-ground reporting as things start to kick off. Thank you all so much for watching. Stay tuned, and I will see you all tomorrow.